I am so very pleased to continue our conversation on exploring housing options and support options for adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So I am very pleased to have with me today Jane Shaw. And Jane has developed, along with her husband, a very unique model in supporting her son. And before we get started, I just want to encourage families to please do your own research, explore all the options, because what works for one may not work for another one. So I just wanted to put that out there before we get started. But I am so pleased to have Jane with me today and excited to share her unique model for supporting her son. So welcome, Jane.
Thank you, Rita. I'm pleased to be here.
And first, I would love to just tell us a little bit about your son.
Well, my son is 36 years old. He has Down syndrome. He does have 2 part-time jobs where he works. He is one of 4 children that we have raised. He was second in line. He loves trains, World War II movies, Shark Week, anything that is a natural disaster. He has a very interesting range of interests.
Oh, I love to hear that. Love to hear that. So he's 36. So at what age did you decide with your husband and family that you might want to transition him to living more independently?
We were one of the fortunate ones to get a comp waiver early on when I think funds were much more available. So when he was 23, he did receive a comp waiver. So we connected with an agency at that time to have services in the home with people coming in and working with him. He was also able to get, the job coaching too. After about 2 years of people coming into the home, we kind of decided that that was enough. And it was very difficult because I had other children and both my husband and I were still working at the time. So we felt that maybe it was a good time to look at a more independent living situation. So we did go with the agency that was providing the services at the time. And this would have been about 10 years ago. The agency that we were working with used a model that we liked in that they would connect our adults with roommates that they would be interested in rooming with, and also in a situation they might be interested in, for example, an apartment, a townhouse. They were very open to that and providing those kinds of services. So for 2 years, he lived with 2 friends that he had met through camps. He was working at Scottish Rite and was living in Dunwoody in an apartment. And it was essentially 24-hour care that they had in the home or in the apartment. We had some snafus. I think our house managers with the agencies were very good. The other staff coming in and out, not necessarily. And we often would have what we call the rotating door of staff, which was difficult for my son who thrives on routine and connection. So this agency then went to, I think because of financial, I don't know if it was pressures, but then they decided they were no longer going to do that model and they were going to go to the personal care home model. And the 2 young men that my son was rooming with, they were brothers, and the parent decided that she was going to go self-direct and move the boys back into their family home, which was vacant, and do the self-direct model. So we had Evan at that time move to our side of town, Tucker, which was one of our goals, because he was a little far from us in Dunwoody. And so he was living in, again, the agency-sponsored home in Tucker. Again, another good house manager. However, the home was a mess. There was mold. We weren't happy with a lot of the services. The cleaners that came in were charging too much. And again, the rotating door with staff. So at that time, I decided, let me look into self-direct. And we happen to have a service coordinator who was with us for 8 years. She has since retired. And she had an expertise in self-direct. Most of her caseload was self-direct. And she had not, I don't want to say, service coordinators don't push, but she was very frank with me about looking at a self-direct model for him. So at the time, I'm a retired pediatric occupational therapist, and I had been working in real estate with a neighbor. So we were able to find a home in Tucker, a ranch home that met all our needs on a cul-de-sac near MARTA. At the time, we were looking at paratransit, so we wanted it to be on a MARTA line. And my husband and I bought the home, and then we began to start to look into roommates, families, others that could possibly support this model. So this was 7 years ago, and we were flying under the radar. This was not something a lot of people were doing.
So this was way out of the box, out of the box then. Yeah,
very much so. And people continue to say, is this a personal care home? Why are you not having it zoned for a personal care home? And I did a lot of research at the time, and United Cerebral Palsy, I talked with a realtor that was working with them, and she said to me, you do not need to zone this home. You have bought this home in a neighborhood for your son. You have services coming into the home just like others do. Cleaners, people that do the yard, those that have adults that need more assisted living, have nursing assistants coming in. You do not need to zone this home into a personal care home. It's your son living with people he chooses to live with, roommates, and you have staff coming in, just like I said, you have cleaners, you have other people coming into a home. So we went forward with this model.
Okay, so you've self-directed for 10 years. You've had the home roughly for about 7 years. So you developed this model around the needs of your son. How did you find roommates? And so what does that day-to-day consist of for him? And what are the supports that you've built around him?
Okay. Over 7 years, again, it's an ebb and flow, and you have to look at change and things that work and things that don't work. One of the advantages, I think, for us is that Evan was in an agency directed home. So I was able to see what the agency did in a home, what kinds of supports they provided, what kind of paperwork they had for their staff, a little bit of the training, safety issues. So I was able to absorb a lot of that from the agency directed home that he was in. We also, at the time, did have some staff that had a lot of agency experience, so knew a lot of this protocol. His roommates, we invited 2 roommates that were friends of his from his high school. And we determined that the parents would work well with us. At the time, one of the roommates a family lived about 3 blocks away from the house. So, we felt like that was, great support. We were not very far from the house. We were about 15 minutes away from the house. And the other family, again, was from Tucker. So we started with the 3 roommates, and then we had found, or Evan and the 2 roommates, and then we were able to find what we call our safety net person. She was a special ed teacher, and she had quite a few loans, and she was very interested in living in the house as our safety net at night, and to be there in case of any kind of an emergency. And we did that for reduced rent for her. Since then, we've had 4 live-ins, not because any of the live-ins didn't work, but for example, our first one was able to save enough money to buy her own home near where she was working. We had another one who got married. All of our live-ins have stayed connected with the house. They enjoyed it. It's just their lives changed. They were younger, and one of our live-ins became full-time staff and decided she couldn't be full-time staff and live within the home. We did the second year of the home. It was a ranch with a basement, and we finished off the basement so that it became a private apartment for our safety net person. And that worked better. So they have a private entrance and exit. They have access to the house, but they have their own private space in the basement. And then they share laundry facilities and kitchen facilities with the roommates, but they do have a kitchenette, their own refrigerator, their own shower, living area. So we found that that worked better. And again, we offer reduced rent. Our safety net individual signs a contract that says they will be there Sunday through Thursday from 10 in the evening to 7 in the morning. And they have the weekends, they have the Friday and Saturday off, essentially, if they choose to. And then we hire respite if they decide to go out of town or leave or don't want to be on call that evening.
And how did you find the safety net folks? Was it word of mouth, networking?
Word of mouth, yes. One of them was through my Pilates class that I took. You just, as my husband, who is in sales, says, network or not work. So it's just a lot of networking. Now, our one that is with us now, she's older. She's wonderful. I was trying to find someone again, and I was having trouble finding someone for the space. And another friend of mine whose boys are doing self-direct and has a home also, she said, look into roommates.com. And I was a little nervous about that. In fact, very nervous, but I did. And I explained the situation. We had it in my husband's name, and we had 2 great candidates that came through, and we selected the one we have now. But the friend that had recommended roommates.com, she has a couple that lives in the basement of their home and works with her sons. And she's been with them. I think they've been in that home for 6 or 7 years.
Wow. So what you developed is really the gold standard, Jane. But I'm going to ask a little bit about the details, because it is a house. And so I think I remember at a conference that you spoke at a long time ago that you sort of divide things. So let me know if this is right, with your husband, that he handles the maintenance. And you handle sort of the administrative side of the waiver and self-direct. Is that, did I get that right? Okay.
Yes, that's true. And he's got the easier side of it. Maintenance is the easier side. All of us know that are doing self-direct, the staff training, Acumen, EVV, Medicaid changes, trying to stay up with everything is, as my husband says, an unpaid part-time job for sure, sometimes full-time job. So yeah,
absolutely. So it sounds like you've created the ideal situation. Can you tell us a little bit about maybe some of the things that are challenging with this particular model?
I think people would say finding staff, but that hasn't necessarily been a challenge for us. Initially, when the roommates came in, they each had staff because they had some self-direct funds, or they were self-directing and they had some comp waiver funds. So they brought staff with them. And at the time when we started it, I don't know if you'll remember, it was Medicaid required that it was 1 staff per 1 adult. And so we had 3 adults and 3 staff, like at dinner, working. Okay. And, it was crazy, but that was what Medicaid had required at the time. But then they eventually had changed over and allowed a staff person to work with 2, 3 adults. And so we were able to share staff, and that worked out really nicely. So And you can bill for shared staff. So not only are you saving in your comp budget by, 3 billing, your staff also earns a little bit more
So that was a
when,
policy change that was advantageous to your particular model. Okay.
well, yeah, it didn't make sense. And I don't think it made sense throughout any of that, the agencies with their homes either, to only have
One to
one
one.
staff.
Yeah.
Yeah. For one person. I think obviously there are times when you definitely need that. But for us, we had 3 adults at the time that were all working and part-time jobs. And if one adult needed directed care, they were getting that from a staff person. And if the other 2 adults were in the house, in their room, reading or, doing iPad or watching TV, there was a staff person there, but not necessarily working with them. But you had the comfort of knowing there's a staff person there. So we did, we had to work a lot of that out because we did have a lot of good staff at the time. And I will tell parents that you need to interview the families that you're going to have in the home very carefully, because not only is it roommates getting along, but it's also parents being on the same page and parents getting along and willing to put in the
So
time.
have you ever interviewed or maybe worked with parents that maybe it wasn't the best match and you said, oh, I wish we would have known a little bit earlier?
We did.
Okay. And that happens, right? Yeah.
Yes, we did. And I will also be honest, in the 7 years, our adults change and their medical needs change, their psychological needs change. And particularly with COVID, we were able to keep the house open during COVID, but my son was able to continue with his job after a certain amount of time. He was working within a hospital, but not on a floor that had COVID patients. And we felt it was very safe because what the hospital was employing. But his 2 roommates quit their jobs. They were in retail and grocery, and they felt that it was not safe. So they were home 24/7 during COVID. And I think that led to some roommate strains. And
Sure.
also my son had some anxiety challenges that he had to work through. So with that being said, we are now, 2 of the roommates have moved into another home with a model just like ours. They copied our model and bought
Okay.
a home. And our son is now living by himself in the home. We are, looking for one more roommate. However, he's very happy being by himself. So
And a
I'm
lot
not
of
sure what
folks
we're
enjoy
going to do.
that. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, he's very happy there, and we were able to share the staff that we had between the 2 houses. They're very close to each other. So, it has worked. Change is probably one of the greatest challenges I think that we all face.
So you continue to share staff even though they don't live together.
Correct.
Oh, that's great. You made it work out. Okay.
I think one of the things that we do, and I don't want to get esoteric here, but when you have staff that stay, you develop a community. And our staff loved the house, they loved our adults, and they had developed a community, and they loved the parents. And one of their biggest fears with this change was the loss of community. So we have attempted to continue to have that community.
And that is so important what you just said. When you have staff that stay, you develop a community. And so it's wonderful when that does happen. And we have staff that stay multiple years and longer.
Yeah.
So if family members want to start something similar to what you're doing, is there anything that you would advise them to do or not do?
I think the first thing is to make sure, or this worked well for us, is to make sure your adult's home or wherever you choose for them to live is close to where you are. as a fallback, as a safety check, or close to someone that you trust that can deal with any kind of maintenance issues. Or, for example, if you have a staff that's sick, or during COVID, I think that that's very, very important. We realized when our son was living in Dunwoody at the time, he was not happy being so far away from us. And so having him move back to Tucker and being closer, I think has been great. And he also went to Tucker High School, so this is his community. This is where he grew up, and he really likes that. The other thing is we bought a house on a cul-de-sac. I think a cul-de-sac is really important for safety. And again, I think I talked about the MARTA line. If you use paratransit, if you need to use that, looking at, and that, that whole thing has changed within the last 10 years too, as far as what's going on with MARTA and paratransit, the LVN. We also looked into, technology is really wonderful today and is very helpful for our adults. We do have cameras in our home that we've put in for safety. We don't have them in every bedroom or every room. We have it in the main area of the house, the kitchen, and the great room. And it's a great way for families to check to make sure everything's okay. We have an alarm that our safety net person sets and unsets. And, we haven't had really any big safety issues, which has been really nice in the 7 years. I think the other thing that we did do is employ a lot of things that agencies use, such as a medication log, a manual for our adults that has all the information about them. We do have emergency drills, what to do in case of fire, tornado. We had staff train them on all of that. We have a safety checklist for the house. Those are all, I think, really important things to have that you probably have in your own home too. You have to think about those things. The other thing is a very simple layout for a home. We have a ranch and we have all hardwood floors, which is very easy to clean. And everything is on one level. And again, our support person does live in the basement that we redid. What else about the house? I think this house particularly has been as easy to manage as maybe a townhome or an apartment, just because of the layout and what we did. The other thing is we did we call it Twin Magnolias. We put Twin Magnolias in an LLC just to cover us in case of any kind of injury to staff or one of the adults. And we also had a special needs trust. We put the home in a special needs trust to also cover that. And my husband and I have been working on, we've been kind of on a 10-year plan right now. We're working on going towards another 10-year plan. And the biggest question we always get is sustainability.
Right.
How are you going to sustain this model? And I wish I had the answers. We do have a son, his younger brother, who lives in Atlanta and who is interested in taking over and managing the home. And we have educated him on all of that, and we keep him in the loop. However, not every family has that availability. So that's our next thing we are planning to look at is this going to be sustainable for our son? Is this something that he can age in place? Or do we need to look at another model? And I think I told you, Rita, I had contacted several agencies to talk about, the possibility of an agency coming in and taking over the home as my husband and I age, because our son loves the home. And, it really is a nice home, a nice model. We have great staff. None of the agencies have called me back. And I understand right now with COVID and, the great need going on. So that will be in the new year. That will be my big Advocacy is tracking down these agencies and talking to them about, is there any interest in coming in and taking over a home, that was self-direct, and managing it.
Well, and in our state, we have, I think it's over 2,000 families that self-direct. So this is an issue, right? Sustainability. And you talked about, purchasing a home. This model could be done in an apartment, correct, in a townhome. So if individuals maybe can't purchase a home, there are other ways to do this, right? But talk about that sustainability. That is an issue, right, with this model.
It is. And it's the next area that I've got to research. And I do think it's something where those of us in self-direct need to have more information on this, and how can we sustain these models, because they're working. It's not like this model is not working for him. Obviously, he's been there for 7 years. The issue with the sustainability is my husband and my age, as we age. And as I said, I would love for my son to be able to age in place. I have a 94-year-old mother who says, do not put me in assisted living. I want to age in place in my home, provide what I need in my home. And, I have a sense that's what my son would say too. So it's.
Well, I'm so glad you're bringing this up and being an advocate for the sustainability of those of us that self-direct, because it's the big looming question out there. How do we keep this going? And is that even possible? It is. You also talked about, and I know as well as a self-direct family, there's a lot of energy that we put into this, right? You called it kind of unpaid work prior, earlier in the interview. But talk about that. I mean, is that something that you'll be able to sustain, you and your husband, that energy of hiring, training, keeping up with the home? And I love hearing that you and your husband have a plan, a 10-year plan.
Yeah, we're trying to put together, a 10-year plan. I think, we're kind of at the end of the plan that we started when we were a little younger, 7 years ago. Rita, I wish I had a lot of good answers for this. It's something that does keep me up at nights. My husband is not retired. He is still working, but I am retired, and I have found the freedom in painting and art. And it's something that I would love to explore and do more of in my retirement. Not that I would never continue advocating for my son, but it would be nice to have a little extra help in that. And, I think one of the things I did start looking at was, are there other models? Are there other agencies that are willing to come in and help parents like us, for a fee, obviously, but to help manage some of this?
Does anything like that exist?
I've been looking.
Well, you never know, Jane. I mean, this could be the
Exactly.
conversation that starts something new. So I think it's important to have these conversations. And I appreciate that you're saying, I don't have all the answers, because I always tell families, if someone claims they have all the answers, please run, because we are all in this together, struggling and trying to figure things out. So
I think, Rita, those of us that are self-directing in the home and aging, we have the exact same problem.
Right.
What is the sustainability model if you are in the home and your adults living in your own home and you've got staff coming in?
So is there anything else that you want to share with us as we come to a close?
No, I think, let me look at my notes. I mean, Rita asked a whole bunch of wonderful questions, and as she always does. And I think the only other thing that I would like to see is those of us that are doing self-direct, that we have more access to be able to have resources, or back when I started doing this, I used a lot of professionals that I connected with in agencies. Many of them have retired, or have moved on to other things. And I don't have that connection anymore of people that were in the loop with Medicaid, or in the loop with what was going on within the state. And, I'm frantically trying to keep up on Facebook and, the now comp waiver, and with, reading through Acumen and whatever newsletters come through. But I sometimes feel like we are satellites, kind of without a tether. And who will be the one to help tether all of us that are doing self-direct? I don't know where we can go on that.
Yeah, very, very good point. Very good point. Well, Jane, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate all that you and your husband and your family have done in this groundbreaking work. It really is. Because we all care so much for our adults with intellectual developmental disabilities, and we want to see them thrive in their own homes, whatever that home is. And so I just appreciate you and everything that you're doing, and you're definitely a pioneer. And thank you so much, and
Thanks.
best of success in your future plans.
Thank you. I appreciate
All right.
it. Thank you so much. Have